Today, we're going to talk about something near and dear to my heart: empath versus sociopath. These are terms that get tossed around with willy-nilly today. They absolutely do. They just get tossed around. So what is an empath? An empath is a highly sensitive person. They don't just feel for other people, they feel with other people. Like if someone in a room is angry, the empath might find themselves feeling angry all of a sudden or agitated, and they don't know why. They can feel things with people instead of just for people. It's a little deeper emotional tie they have to everyone around them. So they're picking up signals from other people. Some are aware of it, some aren't, some know how to control it, some don't. I prefer the scientific term of highly sensitive person. I think a highly sensitive person is sentient. They pick up, energies around them. They can also pay attention to themselves. A highly sensitive person can learn how to not just be sucked in by everybody else's emotions. Now, that said, Carl Jung, Jung, called them introverted intuitives, and he was one. And a very interesting man. And he studied a lot of work on introverted intuitives, which has become a highly sensitive person, work done by Dr. Elaine Aron based on Carl Jung's work. And so I'm here today to kind of simplify that. They've glorified it in a very wonderful way. And to simplify it, an empath is someone who feels for and with people to a very deep extent. A sociopath feels nothing for anyone empathically. Now, that said, here's where the compare and contrast comes in. So at the either end of the spectrum of empath to sociopath, the empath feels everything for everyone. That's a hardcore one. And a sociopath feels nothing for no one. They don't have any remorse, no guilt, no feelings. Now, here's where the comparison gets a little scary and a little hairy. An empath who's highly sensitive will pick up cues. They're here to help other people. They're reading people like a book to help them. But they also are missing some of their internal cues, their own self. They lose their self. To the dark side, they can become codependent, meaning that they lose themselves caring for others. So they really an empath really needs to get a grip on their own emotions and how to stay in touch with themselves and how to seek solitude and become self-actualized. And if you don't like any of those terms, including self-love, at least learn to like yourself enough to stay attuned, so you don't get overtaken by someone who is sociopathic, if not just a hardcore sociopath. Because sociopaths, if you notice, and you'll notice on the news a lot, they're reading people like a book to hurt them. The word con man came from the word confidence man. They gain your confidence, then they just rip it out from under you. These are the people who might read you like a book and say, oh, you're nice. I see you're given to an organization. I left my wallet at home. Can you loan me 10? Can you spot me for 10? And then immediately they'll pay you back the 10. And then a few weeks will go by and they might ask you for 30 or 40 and they'll pay that back too. The next time it's 1,000 or so. That's a confidence man. They've gained your confidence and your trust only to crush it later. It's in increments. They're very good at doing it. They're reading you like a book to use you, and then they lose you when it's over. So do you see why balance is so important to understand? If you're an empath versus a sociopath, be very aware, because empaths tend to believe the best in everyone. That can be pathological. It really, really can. So how do you do this without becoming cruel or harsh or cynical? Well, you really don't have to. Just pay attention to yourself. I have a video on the vagus nerve and how to pay attention to it. We have physiological reactivity. Pay attention to yourself if you get an icky feeling around someone. If something doesn't feel right, pay attention to it. It doesn't mean you're right because you're an empath and you're right all the time. It doesn't mean that, but pay attention to it and give it time. If somebody asks you to do something for them that's magnanimous that you would never ask someone to do for you, think about that. Buy yourself some time. You don't automatically have to give someone that is something just because they ask for it. I know I used to do that when I was younger because I'm an empathic person. Someone would just say, I love your cell phone. I want one just like it. And I must have it. They don't make those anymore. Please give it to me. I really, really want it. I would feel so pressured. And you realize that's a sociopathic thing they're doing. They're making me feel guilty for having something they don't have that I spent hard-earned money on. Wow. I've always said, an empathic or a codependent type person, a hardcore empath when they say you can't give of what you don't have, well, they will. If you ask them for $10 and they don't have it, they will borrow it. They have 8. They'll give you their 8 and go borrow 2 and be in debt for 2. That's why you've got to be careful as an empath, not to let other people's feelings dictate to you how you should feel. They will use guilt, fear, coercion, and a legal term is called undue influence. Empaths are very likely to be victims of undue influence if they are not attuned to their own feelings, and if they're always feeling for everybody else and giving and giving and giving and giving until they don't have anything left to give, until they give out. They've given until they give out. I've always said, they say, it's not that I can't take it anymore, I can't give anymore. Sociopaths love people who are givers. They love to take, people love to give. So if they can evoke your sympathy, and sometimes those are vulnerable narcissists, or pop psychology calls them covert narcissists, and psychological term is a vulnerable or a fragile narcissist. You got to be really careful about those, because they'll evoke your sympathy. Well, you have so much more than me, or you've done so much more than me. You should give me that, or you should let me use that information. Well, be very careful of that, because an empath can read you like a book to help you, and a sociopath can read you like a book to harm you. And did you see my little dog just jump up there? He's very empathic. Dogs have mirror neurons. So how do they do this? Mirror neurons. He can sense the tension in my voice. He came up behind me because he's hearing me talk about something. My voice is elevated, and he hears that. So he's getting closer to me. Dogs have mirror neurons. They're highly sensitive. So are most animals. We can exchange between species, but when we're talking to one another, we're throwing off signals and body language, and empaths are paying attention to them to recognize and help people. And sociopaths are paying attention to them to see are you careless with where you put your money? Are you giving to people? Do you have a hard time saying no? Tell me a little bit about yourself. Boy, that's a loaded question. Be very careful when you first meet someone and they say, tell me a little bit about yourself. Make sure they tell you a little bit about themselves too, and pay attention to your tension. And if you feel any dissension, notice that. So I hope that helped you understand the difference between an empath and a sociopath in a very simplified way, because they both have the same skill. They just use it with different intent, and the intent is very different. One is very sinister, the sociopath, and one is very kind and sincere. So when sincere meets sinister, bad things can happen, usually to the sincere person. So please pay attention if you're an empath or a highly sensitive person. And if you're a sociopath, you're probably not going to even listen to this. But I'm just trying to help people who have fallen prey, because they are predatory. And most people have fallen prey to some form of sociopathic or disordered abuse. Most people have. And so just recognize these little things that we tend to ignore. And you do that by just listening to your own body. Do you feel centered? Do you feel badly about yourself when you're around someone? I've always said the best person you need to trust is yourself, because we can't trust everyone with everything, including ourselves. But if you can learn to trust yourself enough to know who you can trust, if you feel good about yourself around someone, they're good for you. If you don't, they may not be. So just be very aware of yourself as an empath, because sociopaths are very aware of you if you're not. So if you're aware of you and you're conscious of your subconscious drives, then you won't get taken. You won't get taken in, you won't get taken out. And these are very important things. And I hope it helped.